People say rural quiet is good for sleep, but the kind I found wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, rain-damp kind that swallows your own breathing. Last spring, I took a week in a borrowed farmhouse outside Clay County, Kentucky, after a bad breakup. No neighbors within a mile, a gravel road, tin roof, storms in the forecast. The listing promised solitude and a working wood stove. It didn't mention the missing person flyers at the gas station, or the knocks that began beneath the floorboards on night 2, or how the rain made footsteps vanish even as they circled the house. I reached the farmhouse just before dusk. Windshield, painted with steady rain, the gravel road a pale scar through pasture and dark timber. Whoever built the place had chosen high ground above a brown creek that pushed at its banks like a tired animal. The front room held a wood stove, a coil spring couch, and a crooked shelf of paperbacks swollen by damp. No service, just the tick of cooling metal and rain drumming the roof in slow applause. I told myself it was perfect for sleep. You could hide inside that sound. After a can of soup and 2 logs on the fire, I walked the porch with a flashlight, counting seconds between thunder and the hiss of runoff in gutters. Nothing moved but water. Back inside, the door swelled when I shut it, sealing the house like a jar. I slept until a knock under the floor woke me. At first I told myself it was the stove settling or a branch shifting, even though the wind had died. I put my ear to the floorboards and heard only the rain flattening on the roof and the low breath of the fire. After 10 minutes of bravado, I grabbed my flashlight and went outside. The porch boards were slick. The crawl space skirt was a sagging lattice panel you could slide with a boot. I knelt, shoved it aside, and shined the light along the damp strip of earth under the house. Nothing moved. No nests. No eyes. Just cold dirt rucked in ripples, as if something heavy had been dragged once and then forgotten. On the top step sat a coffee can of brand new AA batteries. Someone had scratched Ward into the label. I'd seen that name on a missing person flyer at the gas station. The rain swallowed it. Morning made the place almost friendly. The creek slid past like a tired belt. I made coffee that tasted like pennies and watched steam fog the single pane. A brown pickup eased up the gravel and stopped. The man who climbed out wore a green slicker and the posture of someone who knocks only if he must. He introduced himself as Dale from the electric co-op, making rounds before the river rose. He asked if the lights had flickered. I said not yet. His eyes moved to the coffee can on the step. "Ward leave that?" he asked. I said I didn't know the name. Dale took off his cap and wrung the brim. He put out cameras, like to watch what the water brought. He nodded toward a locust near the porch. 2 bright nails and a loop of blue twine hung there. "Markers," he said. "Follow only yours." By afternoon, the rain deepened from patient to purposeful. The creek licked higher against its banks, and the downspout gushed a silver rope. I rigged a cheap motion chime to the porch with fresh batteries from the can, feeling foolish and comforted at once. Dusk came early, as if someone dimmed the ridge. The power flickered, then dropped. The house sighed into candlelight. And woo, Sandro 17. The chime rang once. At 9:18, it rang again. I eased the curtain and saw only rain moving like beads on strings. When I opened the door, 3 slow knocks answered from beneath the floorboards, paced like a metronome. I shut it fast and stood breathing the wood. A cruiser nosed up the gravel. A deputy in a slicker, Rains, asked if I was alone. "Flooded roads out there," she said. "If power stays out, don't wait after dark." She looked past me inside. After she left, the house felt emptier, like her headlights had been a kind of heat. The rain thickened again. Close to 2 a.m., with the power still gone, I heard cloth sliding on damp soil beneath the floor, then a sound like someone clearing a drowned rote. I held the phone with Rains's card pulled up and did not call. A long breath whistled. Through the boards, not quite words, 3 knocks followed, patient, spaced. I stayed in the chair until the window grew from black to the color of dishwater. When I opened the door at first light, a 5-gallon bucket sat centered on the porch, brimming with creek water. On its rim, on edge, a wheat penny waited. Bare footprints, wide-toed and deep, led from the steps toward the locust and back. The blue loop on the nail had been retied once again, not towards the house. When the creek dropped enough to ford, I drove to town, coins in my pocket because leaving them felt worse. The diner smelled like coffee that had been brave a long time. Rain sat alone, radio on the seat, wet hat on the formica. She watched me walk in like she'd measured the distance already. I told her, not all of it, but most. Knox, bucket, prince. The blue knot turned toward the house. She didn't write anything down. She stirred her coffee without looking and said, "Markers tell you who you are when the rain tries to decide for you." I asked about Ward. She said he walked Brewer at night, checking creeks, moving other people's markers like a kindness. Last spring, he stopped coming in. They found his truck with the seat back and the driver's door open to weather. "No sign of Ward," she said. "Plenty water." Back at the farmhouse I packed because packing felt like control. The rain slackened and then returned meaner, the kind that makes every edge bleed. I kept telling myself I'd leave by dusk, and then dusk arrived like a bad idea. At 8:40 the chime sounded. At 8:43 it sounded again. I opened the door and found the bucket back in the center, empty now, its rim beaded like glass. Balanced on the edge stood a dime, silver, trembling in drafts I couldn't feel. Down by the locust, 2 nails had become 3. The blue loop retied so the knot stared at me. I took the coins because leaving them felt like permission. The floor knocked twice under my feet as if to confirm the exchange. I locked the door, slid a chair under the knob, and sat against the stove with my boots on, listening to rain rehearse names. Near midnight, the power returned, lights stuttering like a heart trying to remember its job. Relief made me greedy. I dozed in the bright kitchen chair. The footsteps woke me, bare, wet, deliberate, crossing the linoleum without hurry. I didn't lift my head. A shadow slid across the oven door, long and thin, bending at the wrong place. It stopped at the bedroom and waited, as if rooms could answer. Then a hand slipped under the door gap, fingers gray with silt, and tapped the underside of the floor. 1, 2, 3. The old house held its breath the way lungs hold back a cough. Rain softened on the roof as if listening. I said, "Ward?" Because fear wants a name like a key there. The answer rose from the crawl space. Not speech, but a breath dragging my name through mud and pebbles, testing the shape until it nearly fit. I left at first light without grace, boxing the last things with shaking hands and hauling them through rain that seemed interested in my choices. The ford looked high, so I took rutted pasture tracks until a two-lane gathered me like a parent. I didn't drop the rental key in town. I slid it under the diner door with a note that said, "I'm sorry." For 3 nights after I got home, I slept with the TV on to drown any knocks. On the 4th, a padded envelope arrived without a return address. Inside was an SD card and a single inkjet photo. My porch at night, the bucket centered, the coin balancing on edge, rain stitched into white lines by the flash. At the edge by the locust, a man stood barefoot, face turned away, work shirt dark with water. The stitched name clearly over his pocket said, Ward. I moved apartments and told myself cities don't have crawl spaces, only neighbors. It helped, until the first storm. The sound machine I bought stays set to rain, and most nights it covers what I don't want to hear. Sometimes I wake to 3 knocks in the heater pipes, patient as a metronome. The coins live in a drawer I don't open. But once I found the dime balanced on its edge on the dresser, and I live alone. I keep Rains's card in my wallet like a talisman. Her penciled number smudged after a summer of sweat. But the advice she gave me holds. Tie only your own markers. I don't take narrow roads in storms. If you do, and the house seems to lean toward you like a friend, remember, rain loves footprints and hates answers. If the floor knocks 3 times, don't knock back. Some doors open down. I don't scare easy, and if you live out here long enough, you learn the difference between country silence and the kind that means trouble. I'm 34, born and raised in a wet, hilly corner of eastern Tennessee, where roads follow creeks, because no one was brave enough to cut straight through rock. By day, I work the hardware counter. In storm season, I volunteer with county roads. Chainsaws, barricades, warning tape, the dull heroics of keeping people from driving into black water. This was last April, second night of a 3-day soaker. The kind of rain that stitches the world into gray curtains. Noe's robot voice kept chanting flash flood warning until it felt like prayer. Around 11, my supervisor texted, County Road 7, Low Bridge. It likes to comb driftwood. When it jams, the creek climbs the asphalt, and the first panicked sedan becomes a headline. I took the Orange County pickup and let the rain bite while I ran for the driveway. Wipers on high, hazards blinking, I crept through a tunnel of water and barn shadows. At the bottom of the hill, I saw what was wrong. Both A-frame barricades were shoved off to the shoulder, amber flashes winking polite apologies. The concrete deck trembled under the creek's breath. Logs hammered the girders in a rhythm that made my teeth feel loose. I parked just shy of the crown, reset the sawhorses across the lane, planted 2 flares, and listened. Listening is half the job in a storm. You learn the pitch of a tree surrendering and the slurp a ditch makes when it finds a new path. I heard something else. Tap, 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 pours, tap from the rail, too hollow to be water, too patient to be accident. I swung the floodlight along the downstream guardrail and saw only foam. Then the beam picked up a silver sedan on the far shoulder, nose to the rail, driver's door ajar. It hadn't been there when I rolled up. The wipers were frozen mid-swipe. 2 crisp footprints stepped out onto the wet asphalt and stopped clean at the white line, like the person had walked into there. "County roads!" I shouted across the noise. "Don't move! I'm coming around!" The creak punched the deck hard enough to make the bolt speak. The tapping answered from the opposite rail, then under my boots, duller, as if knuckles were rapping wood beneath carpet. My handheld radio crackled on channel 2. A smooth, tinny voice said, "Unit at CR7, copy?" Not Marlena Dispatch, someone I didn't know. "Copy," I said, eyes on the water. "Advise," the voice said pleasantly. "High water east approach. Do not cross span." "I'm not crossing," I told it, and it repeated me half a beat late. "Not crossing," then added, "Move the barricades." Static licked the tail of the word. I kept to the crown and walked the far lane to the sedan with the floodlight. Keys in the ignition, a red-cased phone on the passenger seat showing a failed SOS call, 2 quarters in the cup holder tails up. Back seat held a folded poncho and a grocery box from 3 towns over. On the painted line by the front tire, 3 heavy, glass-smooth pebbles were laid in a row, like someone needed to leave proof for themselves. "Sir or ma'am," I called toward the water, hope hiding behind formality. "Move to high ground." The creek took another bite of the shoulder and chewed. The tapping quickened beneath me. Tat, tat, tat. And stopped, like it was listening back. Headlights bloomed behind me. Relief rose and sat. A pickup rolled to a stop short of the barricades. Driver's door open, dome light on, but nobody in the seat. A paper highway map lay open with 3 blue circles. This bridge, the next crossing downstream, and the Dinah on 68. A pen had bled into the paper like it had been stabbed and left to drown. Tasks beat panic. I set 2 more flares, pocketed the sedan's keys, and radioed CR7 blocked, abandoned silver sedan east shoulder. Need sheriff and EMS staged at the firehouse. Order at girder height. The smooth voice purred, "Copy. Sheriff en route. 15. A breath of static. Then Marlene came on hot. "Negative. Sheriff's tied up on 19. I can get state in 25. Who's on 2? "Thought that was you," I said. "It ain't." 15 yards down, a rectangular shape rolled in the flood. Not a log. Looked like a chunk of dock. For a heartbeat, the floodlight found a yellow hood on it. The next second, the raft flipped and was gone. I heaved the throwback because muscle memory pays no attention to odds. The line struck nothing, came back as empty as a promise. My radio, repeat it, softer, came back as empty as a promise. And I snapped it off. The screen kept a faint gray glow anyway, like an eye that refused to blink. I noticed an extra set of shoe prints then, smaller, sharp new tread, crossing the white A. Line, stepping onto the wet steel cord of the bridge as if it were a balance beam. The last print towed into black water. That's where you choose between hero and effective. I am not a swimmer. I am good at saying no in a way that sticks. I backed off the span. When I took a photo for the report, the flash lit rein and rail. In the display, a smear sat behind me. 3 pale ovals at knee height, like a hand had pressed there. A state trooper arose, real as a paycheck, big man in a hat that carried its own weather. "Hail," he said, shaking rain off his brim. I briefed him fast, and the tapping returned like it had a script. He leaned over the rail, tapped twice with his maglite, and a log thumped the girdle back. The post he'd used wobbled like a loose tooth. "Get off the span," he said in a voice that made argument feel childish. We stood in the strobe of our trucks and watched the creek work. The sedan's dome light blinked on for 5 seconds without a door moving. Something pale bobbed up onto the bridge, a 5-gallon bucket upside down with a string through the handle, the kind kids use for crawdads. Hale made a sound that wasn't a word. "Upstream culverts are clogged," he said, like he was trying to turn thought into fact. "I'll run the other approach. Keep this side tight." He left 2 cones and drove into rain that didn't care. I kept the bridge shut for hours, logging every nothing. At 2:07 the water dropped an inch. At 2:11 the tapping stopped. At 2:19 the sedan's interior light blinked again. At 2:26 the wind inside the rail said my name in my own voice, a fraction too slow, and I took the battery out of the radio and still heard it. By dawn, the creek retreated like a dog that remembered discipline. We towed the sedan and swept limbs off the crown. The registered owner didn't answer. The phone pinged a tower miles away. That afternoon, the supervisor said, "Good work," which is how we mark survival, and sent me home. A week later, a kid fishing the slack water downriver found a cracked, red phone case in a tangle of roots. The sheriff called a number from a crumpled insurance card. A mother came 2 counties, crying with her keys in her hand, because what else do you hold when you can't hold your child? They never found that rest. Floods keep secrets like old men. I still work storms. Someone has to move the sawhorses back where they belong. But on rain nights, when Noah's voice turns into church, I think about the tapping and how some people hear patterns where others hear mercy. If you roll up on a bridge with the barricades nudged aside and prints that stop at the line, set your flares and listen. If your radio starts repeating you half a beat late in a voice that greases your spine, don't argue. Get off the span. And if you ever see 3 pale ovals on wet steel, like the imprint of a hand, don't put your own hand there to check. Some places don't want help. Some water doesn't want a name. I make my living climbing the things weather tries to break: light poles, antenna masts, towers that disappear into rain. I'm the county radio tech. When storms sit on the ridge and the creeks forget their banks, my job is keeping the repeaters alive so deputies and fire can still say, "We're coming," and mean it. Last May, on a night that the forecast called a training line, and my bones called biblical, Wolf Gap started alarming. Wolf Gap is a chain-link fence around a metal hut and, 40 yards off, an old fire lookout tower with its cab rotting off its steel legs. Our VHF repeater lives at the base because it sees 3 counties. It runs commercial power with a propane generator. It almost never needs me at 2 in the morning. That night it did. Generator cycling. Controller throwing phantom kids with no unit IDs. The service road turned from gravel to rock. Rain braided down the windshield. Every rut was a spillway. The NOAA radio droned flood warnings until it sounded like prayer. My headlights found the fence and something was wrong. The padlock wasn't cut. just polished, like somebody had worked it with a file and then changed their mind. The gate was latched, not snapped. The hut door hung true, but the hasp showed a fresh crescent of bare metal where paint had flaked under prying. The tower's guy wires sang when the wind punched them. Low, organ deep. Inside, rack lights chased each other, controller solid, power supply good, duplexer happy, but the activity LED blinked like a nervous eye. Logs showed a dozen site kiops in the last hour. Our sub-audible tone, no unit numbers. On the bench sat a county handheld laid on a towel, like someone had been drying it with care. The towel was still damp. Nobody but me is supposed to be here. Refueled the generator, cleared alarms, keyed the shop mic. County Tech at Wolf Gap. Side is up. I'm on scene. My words went out, hit rock, and came back clean. I flipped through channels. Dispatch was juggling wrecks and trees on roofs. Fireground begged people off creek banks. Our tech channel was quiet. Then I heard the chime. Not a radio tone, a physical sound, thin, metallic, wind teasing something delicate. It came from outside, from above. I killed the hut lights and stepped into the weather. My headlamp found it halfway up the old tower. Wind chimes made of cutlery. 6 spoons and a fork drilled and strung on fishing line, tied to a ring of fence wire. Every gust set them tinkling, a sound too pretty for that ridge. Beneath the tower, the mud told truths rain couldn't erase. Fresh boot prints, a small pair and a larger pair circling the legs. On one leg, a strip of blue survey ribbon. An orange flag lay in the muck at my boot. Ann's new cut. Back in the hut, the repeater caught a carrier, hiss, then a voice that could have been anyone if anyone spoke into a tin can. Testing, testing. You up there? Tone was ours. I keyed, County Tech on site, identify. The carrier dropped. The chimes answered with a nervous run. The controller eyed like a polite cough. I didn't put my hand back on the mic for a full minute. The hand held on the towel lit with an inbound. Unit at Wolf Gap. Do not descend Wolf Road. Trees across switchback 1 and 3. Hold at sight. Male, careful, tired. Copy, I said. Who is this? The answer came half a beat late, as if lag lived in the air. County, stay put. The courtesy beep sounded almost friendly. I decided to do exactly that. At 02:11, the time stopped mid-note. Steel hummed one low chord. The generator hiccuped, then smoothed. Something put weight on the hut's concrete stoop. I turned on reflex. Nothing in the doorway, but rain blowing under and leaving a dark crescent on the floor. The wind carried creosote, river clay, and something sweet, like apples gone too long. I dropped the bar across the door, because people love symbols. I checked. Everything twice. Ground strap tight, coax dry, log time correct. The motion camera over the door had 4 frames for 6 hours. Rain, more rain, a white blur you could call lightning or honesty, and a still of the fire tower with a smear where the chimes hung. Timestamp era 1, 37:12. In the hut window's reflection, the cab didn't look empty for a breath too long. A headlamp glowed through trees on the lower switchback, then died, then flared, moving wrong. Too smooth, as if the trail was walking the light. County Tech, I called. Call out if you're coming up. The beam paused, turned, went dark. The wind repeated my sentence a fraction slow. Syllables dragged through mesh. I shut the door harder than a door deserves. Enough waiting. I took the maglite, clipped my harness out of habit, and walked to the fence. The chain was tight, but the bottom of a panel had been bent up just enough for a body to slide under on a drier night. Outside the fence, someone had laid a neat circle of river stones and left a small metal tag in the center like a dog collar. The stamped name, Ellie. My stomach remembered the break room board and the 2 missing person flyers no one could bear to take down. The prince led to the old tower. From the first rung hung a spoon charm on fishing line, stamped shallow and crooked in the handle, Ward. A name I'd heard in a rumor, hobbyist, weather cams, didn't come home 2 winters back. People love hobbies that love them back. 10 feet up the ladder, the chimes were at my shoulder, and the tower's hum came up through my boots. 3 counties of dark lay below, the kind that feels crowded. In the valley, a smear of light stuttered where the river crossed the road. I heard a sentence I hadn't spoken in months surface in my head like a bubble. Don't follow lights. I climbed back down. Inside, I made the one choice I know how to make. I shut the repeater down for 60 seconds and brought it up clean. The generator took the surge without complaint. The log rolled forward, obedient. For 2 blessed minutes, there was only rain and steel. At 03:03, something slid under the door. A Polaroid in a zip bag, outside wet. The photo was of the tower at night, flash bleaching the chimes to bone. In the lower left, a pair of boots, mine by the tread, stood in the frame. I hadn't taken it. On the back, a date from last winter and 1 word in Sharpie, marker. I didn't throw it away. I put it in my pocket like it might burn if I didn't. Dawn on a rain night doesn't rise. It thins. Chainsaws finally chewed the switchbacks, and the road crew came up with coffee and jokes you tell to keep from counting. I kept my report to hardware because hardware gets budget and ghosts get looks. Before leaving, I cut the chimes and hung them inside on a nail. They sounded wrong in there, like laughter in a church basement after bad news. 2 days later, a deputy called. A hiker had found a weather cam off the service road in a lean-to of pallet wood and tarp. The card was full of night shots of the eye, a tower through rain. The last frame showed 2 figures at the fence, one small, one taller, both turned away. Boot prints led to a wash where the creek had eaten the bank and given nothing back. The deputy said, "We'll keep looking," in a voice that knew how long keep can be. I still go to Wolf Gap. Radios don't fix themselves. Every time I park, I check the fence bottom before the lock. I look for circles of stones and tags with names. The chimes hang inside where the wind can't talk. On clear days, the old tower is a rust scaffold with a view. On rain nights, it's a tuning fork for something the ridge remembers. If you ever find yourself babysitting a site where steel sings and somebody's moved to the fence, do the boring things exactly right. Lock what locks, log what logs, shut it down and bring it back. If a voice you don't recognize tells you kindly to move a barricade or follow a light, stay put. Weather isn't the only thing that learns your habits. And if a photo you didn't take slides under a door with your boots in the corner and the word marker on the back. Don't carry it like a souvenir. It's a route. Don't walk it. I took the graveyard shifts at Miller's Reservoir because storms used to calm me. Rain on a tin roof is a metronome for bad thoughts, and after the divorce, I had a lot of those. The county hires one night watch when big weather sits on the ridge. Check catwalks, watch the upstream gauge, call the operator if it jumps too fast, and if he says so, frack sluice gate 3. It's lonely work. That night, lonely was not the problem. Locals call it Miller's Lake, but it's a 20-foot wall of concrete holding a brown river that was convinced to sit down. A gravel lane passes empty picnic shelters and ends that in a cinder block control building bolted to the dam. Under the wall, the plunge pool chews rock into foam you can feel in your teeth. No Way had been chanting flash flood all afternoon until the words stopped being words and turned into a weather prayer. At 11, I signed the log, hung my jacket, poured coffee that tasted like it remembered other storms, and walked the catwalk with a headlamp, counting steps, because counting keeps fear small. Halfway across, my beam hit something that didn't belong. A child's red rain boot set neatly against the rail with the toe pointed at black water. My mouth said, "No," the way you tell a dog that's about to bolt. When I picked it up, something clinked inside. A penny taped under the insole. Weight back. I tucked the boot under my arm like evidence and built a rational story. Kids at picnic shelters, storm blows things odd places. Back inside, 2 old missing person flyers on the bulletin board blinked at me under dull tacks. The county never pulls them because paper hope is cheap. I wrote 2324, catwalk clear anyway, and pretended the lie would be kind later. At midnight, the upstream gauge jumped a foot in 15 minutes. Somewhere above, a hillside remembered gravity. I radioed. Dispatch, and got Mullin's steady voice. We woke the operator. While I waited, the control room PA, dead for years except to squeal, crackled. A breath slid through the speaker, then a voice that sounded exactly like mine, half a beat slow. Sluice 3. I stood with my hand hovering over the mic and didn't touch it. The operator rolled in at 12:40 in a state truck and a yellow slicker that made him look like a warning sign. He glanced at the gauge and said, 3 notches on gate 3, like ordering coffee. He cranked the lever. Somewhere steel changed its mind. Water bit the spillway teeth and laughed up foam. He listened to the wall, said 2 more, and left at 1:20, boots taking the heat with them. After he was gone, the unplugged PA breathed once and chewed my name like cheap speaker paper. I unplugged it harder. It sighed and forgot how. I walked the catwalk again. Rain erased the far valley. On the concrete, small orange chevrons had been painted, fresh, bleeding a little in the wet, pointing toward the intake tower. A concrete box out in the pool connected by a sidewalk with a locked grate. The padlock on the grate looked like a tongue that had licked something sharp. Fresh scars on the shackle. Zip tied to the fence was a laminated photo, bleached by weather. The catwalk in sun. A man and a little girl holding hands, both looking at the camera with practiced smiles. A date in Sharpie, 2 summers ago. I unclipped it. The wind tried to take it and failed. At 1:43, the upstream gauge leapt again. Marlene said 2 roads were now rivers, and a volunteer engine was stuck in. Clay to the Axos. "Hold your spot," she said. And I said I was holding when what I meant was I am being held. I quick steps crossed the catwalk outside the control room door. Bare or socked, the way kids move when scaring you is the game. I opened the door fast onto unraveling rain. Centered on the threshold sat the red boot, cuff dripping. I moved it, inside under the desk, because out of sight is the only spell I know. The dead PA whispered, slower than before. "Sluice. 3." I unplugged the cord from the wall, looked at the unplugged cord, and felt stupid for wanting that to mean anything. The dam has a lower gallery, a narrow tunnel that runs the length of the wall behind the gates, so you can listen to the structure talk to itself. It smells like chalk and river iron. I took the gallery key because thoroughness is a religion. Rain thumped the door like a lid on a pot. My headlamp turned the world into a small, round truth. Puddles connected in strings. Rust wept from bolts. Twice I heard a second pair of boots mirror mine 2 strides behind. Twice I turned and lit only breath in dust. At the midpoint, a low door bled black into the gate chamber. Huge, blind, where the stems disappear. On the grate sat a 5-gallon vacuum tank with a hose coiled like a snake. It didn't belong. On its lid, duct taped in the zip bag, a Polaroid. The intake tower in daylight, with a red into caution. Through the rain-spattered glass, I saw a deputy silhouette, hat brim low, staring at the gauge through the office window. I opened the door. The seat was empty. The engine was cold. The dash handset lay off its hook, speaker hissing. From the hiss, my own voice, slow by half, said, "Hold your spot." I put the handset back and wiped my palm on my jeans, too late to pretend I hadn't touched it. Around 3, the rain eased just enough to let the night breathe, but the lake kept coming. I crossed the catwalk, with the boot under my arm like contraband, or at the intake fence, a new laminated photo had appeared. Same family, same smiles. But now a blue circle shaded the little girl's hand. The date was more recent. A third photo lay face down under the fence, water pressing it to concrete. I slid it out by a corner. It framed the plunge pool from above. In the boil, a white oval floated. It might have been a bucket. It might have been a face. My headlamp hiccuped to static for a breath, the way LEDs do when a generator sighs. I talked then, not to be brave, but to build a railing. "This is a dam," I told the rain. "This is steel. This is my job." The gauge paused, its climb by a sliver. The wind arranged itself and let me hear a minor chord buried under the roar, like the wall was a harp and something very patient had found the note. I went back to the gallery and opened bleed off on gate 3, 1 notch pass protocol, then another, listening for the wall's answer. Still settled with the tired contentment of a dog finding its bed. The lake obeyed math. The river dropped its shoulders. The cord softened. At dawn, the operator returned with 2 men in thermoses. He asked if I'd slept. I said the gauge didn't let me. None of us mentioned the boot. No one asked why the PA cord lay coiled on the peg with the plug still out of the wall. When my relief arrived, I slid the red boot and the 3 photos into a county evidence bag because even lies like labels. I slept hard, without dreams. Woke at dusk to a padded envelope propped against my apartment door. No return address. Inside, a 4th laminated photo. Me on the catwalk in rain, headlamp haloed, the red boot under my arm. On the back, neat blue print. Markers help us find the right gate. I don't take Miller's shifts now. I tell myself it's the drive, or the coffee, or my back. That's almost true. When rain starts its slow applause on my roof, I put a pan. Under the worst drip and turn, no way off, before the voice can pull prayers out of me. I keep the evidence bag in a drawer I don't open, but sometimes a coin shows up balanced on edge on the dresser, and I live alone. If you take a job watching water, remember water watches back. Do the boring things right. Check locks. Log what you touch. Don't follow voices that arrive half a second late in your own mouth. And if you find a child's boot with a penny taped inside on a storm night, don't pretend it walked there, alone. Some people get found. Some get counted. Some places only know how to count.